I caught my wife cheating after 20 years of love, so I confronted her affair partner and ended his marriage. Now my life is in shambles. I didn't notice the signs that were there. Here are a handful that come to mind. She began sending strange late-night texts. She frequently went out for drinks with her pals. I was happy that she was being friendly, even if this was not her usual behavior. She attended yoga once a week, but it appears that she was not compensated because she assisted with setup and cleanup and the instructor was one of her coworkers. In my opinion, she was also quite rigid for someone who practiced yoga. Callers who are unknown hang up. If we were near each other's phones, we would frequently answer them. She had an unidentified caller on multiple occasions who would end the conversation as soon as I responded. Although we received a lot of spam calls, the calls were typically from telemarketers or debt collectors trying to locate the number's prior owner. It's rarely a hang-up. I was not expected to return until tonight because I work out of town. Tomorrow was our scheduled departure for a 2-week road trip. I came home yesterday afternoon because work was sluggish. Since we've been so busy this summer with family and friends, this trip was meant to offer us some alone time. I didn't recognize the truck in my driveway when I got home. Recently, my neighbor inquired about my opinion of the new truck, but I assumed he was wrong and didn't give it much thought. I had a horrible instinct as soon as I saw the truck. The feeling was there, and it was powerful, even though I loved and trusted my wife. I crept to the window of our bedroom on the side of the house. It was open, and as I approached I could hear them. My worst suspicion was validated when I peered out the window. On my bed they were straight there, nude. I turned to leave. I've been resisting the temptation to do something I'll later regret. Right now, I'm having a hard time caring what happens to me. I spent the night in my family's cabin and drank all that was there. I was about to confront her on my way home today, but I changed my mind. I'm not prepared. Anger is all I can feel. Violence is all I can think about. Right now, I'm not in a good enough state to see her. I'm currently back at the cabin. I've spent the last hour gazing at a 60-ounce bottle of rum. I don't want to become wasted and make poor choices, but I do want to get wasted and forget this. I am aware that this is a pivotal time in my life and that what I do in the days ahead will determine how I live the rest of my days. I am there. I need assistance. I'm contacting strangers because I'm not ready to talk to friends or relatives. F this planet. Edit. The rum will remain nearby for the time being, but I have made the decision not to consume it. My brother is on his way and should be here in a few hours, according to the phone call I made. My wife just texted me to tell me how much she loves me and how excited she is for our trip. I still haven't replied. In addition to my brief update, I wanted to clarify a few remarks and queries that continued to come up. I feel much better today, if you can't tell. The pain subsided almost entirely. Although I still feel like I've been hit in the stomach, I've started to look ahead. I don't think this is correct. Am I just incredibly resilient, or is this a sign of things to come? To shed some light on the queries and remarks I've received, I've included some cliff notes. When I mentioned wife and best friend, I meant the dual roles my wife and I had in our relationship. I didn't even know the other guy, let alone consider him my best friend. I didn't get a good look at him, but based on my fleeting impression and the fact that I saw his car, I don't think it's someone I know. We are childless. However, we intend to have them shortly. We recently sold our home, and when the new owners move in September, we plan to relocate closer to my place of employment. Like he did for me, I will express my gratitude to my neighbor in a subtle way. After a long work travel, I must admit that coming home to Willow P may be one of the worst things. I sincerely apologize for what occurred to you. As for us, we're just getting started, so grab a seat, and let's get started with the first update. My brother and I had a lengthy conversation when he got there. He has been my actual best friend, and I've come to learn that I should never forget that and that he will always support me without passing judgment, just as I would support him. Despite the fact that we occasionally argue, he truly sets the bar for what true friendship is. I chose to reply to my wife's text yesterday night as I was meant to be at home. It made sense for me to just be texting her because we are not permitted to have phones on the premises. She is aware that I may easily slip in a few texts. I informed her in writing that I would not be able to call her until the end of the weekend because I had to travel to one of my company's remote locations. I informed her that I will reschedule after canceling all of the reservations. I rented a romantic bed and breakfast on the vineyard, and she said she could bring her best friend over this weekend. I was aware that she didn't want me to believe that her best buddy would be attending. Since it was non-refundable, I informed her that I had already given it to my brother and his wife, who would reimburse me in a month. I canceled every reservation this morning, with the exception of the romantic one. I'm going with my brother. Luckily, The hotel allowed us to move from the honeymoon suite to a 2-bed room. This just ended up being a long overdue fishing excursion with my brother because there is a really great lake and boat rentals close by. I am therefore free this weekend. That reduced my worry and gave me more time to reflect because I won't have to write or speak to her for a few days. Right now, I'm considering getting a divorce. There's really no other way for me to see it. My brother is in favor of this, however he has requested me to talk to someone for a few weeks. On Monday, his wife is willing to speak with me through a friend of hers who works as a couples counselor. At least it might help me sort out some of this muddle, but I don't see it changing my mind. In order to at least get ready for what I believe is inevitable, I am also starting to talk to lawyers and taking a lot of advice from this place. I want to do it correctly. I don't think she would try to cheat on me, but I also don't think she would try to do so I think I should be ready for anything. That was a brief update, but it gives us a glimpse into the OP's current thoughts. Let's move on to the following update, which is quite extensive and contains a wealth of information. Now, let's go on to that. The last few days have seen a lot of events. To go to the Tibetan breakfast on the vineyard, my brother, Matt, and I drove for over 5 hours. I am really grateful that he has supported me during this time. It helped me get my thoughts straight, although it was more of a venting session. Our fishing trip wasn't very successful. The proprietor of the B&B provided us with some food after we both caught a few trout that we had to release because of their size. Those were quite successful. We took a car back to Matt's house on Sunday. He lives almost an hour away from my home in the town next door. Jen, Matt's wife, was waiting for us when we got there, and we all sat and opened a bottle of white wine that was stored in the cooler. For me, the weekend officially ended at this point. Jen informed me that she chose to spy on my wife while we were abroad. She informed me that the man spent the entire night in my house on Friday, but she arrived on Saturday morning just as he was about to leave. She located the apartment where he resided after following him home. On Saturday night, while she was texting me to tell me how much she loved and missed me, my wife stayed over there. Jen claimed to be dividing her time between stalking my wife and visiting relatives in my town. She claimed to have caught my wife on Sunday morning as she was leaving his apartment and snapped a few photos of them cuddling and kissing before she got into her car. I'd rather not see them. For me, that essentially sealed the deal. If she can so easily go from telling me she loves me and being with another guy, I doubt I could ever trust her again. Nevertheless, I made the decision that I would not react hastily because of my feelings. I must maintain my composure. Jen then informed me that Sharon would be joining us for supper. Jen made an appointment for me with a psychotherapist named Sharon. To be clear, this was my first encounter with my wife, and she has never met her. We got along well, and Sharon was a really pleasant girl. Following dinner, Sharon and I took the dogs for a stroll around Matt's neighborhood while also having a little private chat. Sharon was quite helpful since she listened well and gave me the impression that I didn't need to be cautious. Being that open about how I felt was therapeutic. Even though I get along well with my brother, this was something new and much needed. I enjoy blogging on Reddit for the same reason. It's a way for me to vent and clear out some of the chaos in my thoughts. The only practical advice Sharon provided me during our hour-long walk was to not put off talking to my wife. It will be more difficult to discuss this with her the longer I wait, she said. She explained that right now, I need clarity more than anything else, and my wife is the only one who can provide it. Jen and Matt invited me to remain with them for as long as needed later that evening. I talked to my manager, who was able to arrange for me to live in corporate housing because I'm aware that Matt and I have a time limit on living together. Although I had to leave on days off, I had been staying there every other week for some time. If I needed to, he was able to arrange for me to remain full-time for a few months. Later that week, I made the decision to reschedule with Sharon. For the first session, I thought talking would be enough, and she agreed. I lay in bed all night Sunday, trying to figure out how to go about this. I found this difficult because even the hypothetical situation in my mind made me feel depressed or angry. I made the decision to wing it. Normally, I perform well under pressure. I got up the following morning and bid Matt and Jen farewell. What if he's there when I get home? I asked myself as I drove home. I then reasoned that it would probably only make me feel even more irate than I had been a few days prior. I choose to start with a drive-by. My wife's automobile and his truck were not present. After going inside and gathering a number of necessities and items I didn't want to part with, I proceeded to the man's residence. His truck was there, but so was her car. To find out where she was, I made the decision to write her. "I'm getting groceries," she said. I drove past the grocery shop and verified she was there because I don't trust her at the moment. Admitting that I did that makes me feel so bad, but that's the only way I can be sure of anything and it breaks my trust. "We need to discuss," So I contacted her again and implored her to simply come home. "What's wrong?" she replied in writing. I just replied that she must be prepared to be honest before shutting off my phone. 15 minutes later, she arrived home. As usual, she came over to give me a kiss and an embrace when she entered. I turned my back on her. She repeated, "What's wrong?" to me. I therefore advised her to start telling the truth to me. She seemed not to understand what I was talking about. I replied, "Okay, if you can't be honest, then I'm leaving." At this point, she became frantic and asked, "Are you talking about yoga?" I assumed that was a beginning. She told me that she hadn't been attending yoga when I asked her what she was talking about. "Where were you going if you weren't going to yoga?" I asked. She claimed that because she had been so worried lately, she was taking walks to decompress. "What has been causing you so much stress, and why did you feel the need to lie to me about what you were doing?" I inquired. She said she didn't know how to tell me and attributed it to the transfer preparations. I persisted in pressing, saying, "So you decided to lie. Why did you feel the need to let me know that you were taking a stroll to relieve stress?" I responded that I wasn't stressed when she stated she didn't mean to lie and that she was concerned she would be making me feel more stressed. She didn't appear to be telling me everything. "What do you mean?" she asked, looking at me in amazement. "I think you're lying about more than just skipping yoga," I remarked, glancing at her. "I'm asking you to be honest once more. If you continue to lie, this won't work because you have already lied to me." "Oh, are you talking about last weekend when I went for drinks with some friends and came home late?" She followed up on her attempt to deflect by claiming she was at a loss for words. "I sensed something that disturbed you. I didn't know she went out late or drank drinks." I questioned her whether she was lying again or if it was what she actually did while I was at work, a few hours away. She explained that although she went out for drinks that evening, she didn't run into her purported best friend. In response, I inquired, "Who did you see?" "No one, I just drank alone," she claimed. Naturally, I wasn't buying this, and I was getting impatient. I therefore questioned her, "Is that something now? That you are drinking by yourself?" "Yeah, maybe I have a problem," she replied in response. She had one final chance to be honest before I left, so I told her to get to the bottom of her drinking problem. She claimed she didn't know what else to say after giving me a glance. I simply got up and walked away. I usually take a drive to keep away from her when we argue. She likely assumed this was the same, but then she noticed that I had taken my Xbox, clothes and toiletries. She started blowing up my phone at that point. "There's nothing more to say," I told her, because I offered her an opportunity to be honest and she didn't. She pleaded with me to come home so we could discuss things face to face. She claimed she didn't know what she believed she'd done or why I was so unhappy. She reaffirmed her love for me and her vow to never harm me. I felt a new ache in my chest just listening to her say that. The words were always consoling, and I blindly believed them. It felt like a dull, sharp knife cutting through my heart in the most worst way right now. I hung up because I couldn't take it any longer. Before I was prepared to respond once more, she called back roughly 40 times. "Did you talk to Karen, the best friend?" she asked this time. She responded, "Come home, I don't want to say this over the phone," when I asked why. In order to lower my heart rate, I agreed and continued driving for a little while longer. I then returned home. "I assume you spoke to Karen," she began. She went on to describe how they went out for drinks a few weeks earlier when I was at work, but I just gazed at her. When a few men began purchasing drinks for them, they simply cooperated. One of the guys tried to kiss her as they were leaving, but she quickly retreated and informed them that she was married. She then expressed her regret and wanted to inform me, but she was a fool and chose to keep it a secret from me. She also informed me that without asking, Karen provided his friend my wife's number after hooking up with the other guy. Since then, he has texted her a few times, but she has never responded in writing. After all of that, I just asked her to show me her phone, and she did. Other than her mother and me, there were no texts at all. This was new to her because she never deletes her texts. When I investigated the deleted images, I discovered one of a guy I didn't recognize, even though her photos were clean. She told me it was the man who attempted to kiss her when I inquired who it was. "Why did you take a picture of him?" I asked her again. Once more, she placed the blame on herself, claiming that I was just being stupid. I pointed out that it's not a valid excuse and refused to allow her get away with it. I pressed her once more to explain her actions. She claimed not to know. "Is that all you want to tell me, or is there more?" I inquired, growing weary of the whole situation by this point. That was all she could think of, she said. I went out again. I didn't want to face any more hints of the truth. I climbed into my truck and headed out. She tried to stop me as she hurried outside, but I was already out of her grasp. After having my lunch and trying to think of what to do next, I went to the adjacent park and just sat on my tailgate. As I sat there, I started to recall other things I should have known better, like the times I worked a weekend shift and went to bed early. Along with some of her girlfriends, my wife went out to the club. She wasn't home when I woke up at 4 in the morning. I tried calling her several times, but nobody picked up. She called me back about half an hour later to ask if I could come get her. She informed me that they were unsuccessful in their attempt to hail a cab when I picked her up. Her buddy was approached by a pair of men who wanted to stop at home before offering them a ride. Her married buddy entered a room with one of the guys when they arrived at his residence. According to my wife, she looked for her for long before giving up and waiting with the roommates in the kitchen while enjoying a drink. When I tried to call her, she said she didn't hear her phone. We got into a fight over this, and she ended her friendship with her friend because she was disgusted by what they had done. I assumed that was the end of it. She once made the trip to another city to see a close friend. A scheduled girls' night was held. 4 of the girls were in their pajamas, watching movies while intoxicated. That's what I was told anyway. She then gave me a goodnight call at around 1 in the morning. She kept telling me that they were having a nice girls' night during our 20-minute conversation. Then, in the distance, I heard a man's voice. She initially denied hearing anything when I questioned who it was. Then, loudly, it occurred once again. "Oh yeah, ex-friend took a couple of guys with her," she answered, unable to deny it. Everyone in this place is furious about it. She was 3 hours away and intoxicated. She forced me to put my trust in her once more. We discussed that as well as her refusal to inform me of their presence. She vowed never to place herself in such a predicament again. That obviously didn't stick. I was prepared to try this one last time after recalling all of those things and our discussions about them. My phone rang nearly instantly after I switched it back on. She was yelling for me to come home when I responded. I returned home by car. As soon as I stepped inside, she was there, crying uncontrollably. She kept saying, I'm so sorry," while seated on the couch. "What are you sorry for?" I asked her. She started to rock crazily back and forth. She confessed to lying about the man who attempted to kiss her after it took her a solid 5 minutes to collect her breath enough to talk. I asked her to explain what had transpired after giving her a quick glance. She claimed that evening, the 4 of them returned to his house and played about. Even though I knew there was more, I felt lightheaded simply listening to her say it. There seemed to be a million people talking into my ears at once, and the room seemed to be getting smaller. I believed that I was experiencing a panic attack. To get things back to normal, I went to the restroom and washed my face with cold water. "What exactly did you do?" I asked her again. I forced her to do it even though she attempted to avoid it. She went on to say that she gave him her head after he touched her. "Was that it?" I questioned her, knowing it wasn't all of it, and she said, "Yes." At this point, I was furious and informed her that I would no longer play the trickle truth game and that we would either stop talking or she would have to tell me everything at once. It took her a few more minutes to talk when she started crying once more. She now admits that they had another encounter and shared a bed. Then right away, "I'm so sorry. I will stop at nothing to make up for this because I love you." "Just the one time?" I asked her, knowing the truth. If she tells me the truth, I should please give her a chance to do everything she can to make up for it, she continued after pausing. I promised to give it some thought, and now the whole truth was revealed. She acknowledged that it had been an affair for over a month and that they had been having sex while I was out of town for work. She informs me that he is married and that their divorce is imminent. "Does he know you're married?" I questioned her. "Yes," she replies. "Do you think our marriage is failing if he was having an affair because his is failing?" I then questioned. "No, I don't think ours is failing," she responds, before going on to say, "I'm so dumb. I despise myself. Don't leave me, please. I can make this right." "How would you do that?" I inquired, and she stated she would do anything I requested. "What would fix this for you if you were in my shoes or the shoes of your affair partner's wife?" I questioned her. She said that it would be resolved if she knew the truth and could believe that I meant what I was saying. Then she said, "I'm trustworthy. I made a mistake and will not do it again." "Would you want to know the truth if you were his wife?" I questioned her. "Yes," she replied. "Then fix this?" I said. She asked, "Do you want me to call his wife?" after giving me a look. "If you believe that's what she would want," I said. She attempted to call but never received a response. Her cell phone rang a couple of minutes later. Karen Work was stated as the name. I knew it wasn't Karen because of the shocked expression on her face. Is that him? I questioned. It was, she said. When I replied, he said, oops, I must have the wrong number, being the coward that he is. No, this is the husband of the girl you have been having an affair with, I said. She has something to tell you, so I'm going to let you talk to her. I handed the phone to her. She claims that she told him the whole truth, everything I know, that they were only having a brief affair and that he should never get in touch with her again. Before she hung up and asked him, what divorce lawyer are you using? I demanded to see the phone. I'm not getting divorced, he responded. Why did you tell my wife you were? I asked him. I didn't, he stated. I then requested to talk to his wife since I believed she should be aware of this just as much as I am. Please dude, he said, I didn't realize she was married. Don't let a mistake destroy my marriage. You ruined mine over a mistake, I shot back. It is only right that I inform his spouse. Since she was at work, he begged me not to tell her, promising to tell her everything when she got home. I hung up after saying, all right, you do that. I then turned to my wife and asked her whether she knew the name and place of employment of his wife. She did. My wife called to let me know she was at work. She managed to get her on the phone and instructed her to sit down. This woman stated she will phone my wife back from her car as she was about to depart for the day. She did. What's going on? Was the first question she asked. My wife informed her that she didn't want to start any mishaps and that she had something awful to share with her. Please don't drive, she pleaded. The wife was obviously alarmed and inquired as to the whereabouts of her affair companion. My wife informed her that he was currently in their apartment and doing well. My wife went on to add, I just wanted to let you know that we have been having an affair for the past month. Since I'm currently coming clean to my husband, I felt you should be treated with the same deference. After a minute or so of silence, the affair partner's wife claimed she would find out who my wife was if this was some sick joke. She hung up after that. Karen Work texted my wife less than 10 minutes later, saying, thanks, you just ruined my life. I picked up the phone and replied, you just destroyed 2 marriages and 4 lives. Remember that. You bit of junk, you were to blame for this. My wife pleaded with me to stay with her for the next hour. She promised me sexual favors, counseling, and the promise that she would always be by my side. Thanks to the comments, this was just what I expected. Then as a reward, she suggested that we take that trip. She said, we need time away. My work schedule has been separating us lately, so we need to get together and spend some quality time. And just what I thought she would say. I went, but she wasn't expecting me to inform her. Additionally, she wasn't prepared for me to inform her that I already had a counseling appointment scheduled. She most certainly didn't anticipate my telling her that I had slept with her in my own bed. She probably didn't anticipate that I would have a hotel reservation in place. She sobbed on the floor when I told her all of that. She began to complain that she didn't deserve to live. She advised me to break up with her immediately since she is too awful to be with anybody else. That was how it continued for some time. I listened to her justifications for 4 hours straight, during which time she tried to give me a hug, a cuddle, or even a head if I would just remain and work things out with her. When I finally phoned Karen, I informed her that her unfaithful buddy was suicidal and asked her to come watch her. After that, I departed. I haven't spoken to her since that incident, which occurred about a full day ago. All day long she has been phoning and texting me. All day long her friends and family have been phoning and texting me. Each one has a different justification or request for sympathy. The only person to write to me was her father, who assured me that he would always love me like a son, no matter what, and that I should act in my own best interests. I had my first good cry since this whole thing started when I read it. My counselor Sharon and I have appointments tomorrow and Thursday, respectively. Though I am unsure of everything until it happens, I believe I know where this is headed. I apologize for the long story, it's just a good method to get things out. Once more, thank you very much for all of the letters and comments. I feel so much less damaged and more hopeful because of the folks who are sharing their own tales like this. I truly appreciate all of your words and actions on my behalf. That concluded the update. Before I offer my commentary, we have one last update regarding this story. All I can say at this point is that I believe the OP did a fantastic job of persuading his unfaithful wife to tell the truth. Final update. Well done he. Let's proceed to the last update now. It was a pretty eventful week. I've been alternating between my brother's house and camp. I only stay on nights when I have an early appointment because I want to be as unobtrusive as possible. I've benefited much from my employer's permission to take a few weeks off for personal reasons. I've kept going to see the therapist, Sharon. So far, I've seen her 3 times. Personally, I feel better now than I did a week ago. Therefore, even if I don't think our visits are very fruitful, I do think they're a nice opportunity for me to get some things off my mind. I will therefore continue for the time being. Last Thursday, I had a conversation with a lawyer. I compiled a list of all assets and financial information, including debt, under their guidance. After that, I went to the bank and requested that they put a stop on our accounts so that no one could take money out of them without the other person being there. This won't prevent either of us from obtaining new money, just the old shared money, because we both have our paychecks deposited into our own accounts. Although it's now too late, the lawyer did advise me to wait to confront her until after I've served her the papers. I was getting calls and texts from my wife, her family, and her friends almost non-stop throughout the entire week. My sister-in-law hosted a family gathering at the cabin this past weekend. I went and had to tell my family the news. Now that it's public knowledge, I can incorporate them into my recuperation process. Up until about 8 o'clock on Saturday night, everything was going as smoothly as it could be. When my wife's automobile arrived, my dad, brother and I were gathered around the fire. Matt, my brother, assured me he would handle everything. In order to avoid being seen from the driveway, my dad and I made the decision to take a stroll around the property. I could hear my wife yelling at my brother to move out of the path as we were just about to enter the woodland. She was accompanied by a few of her pals, who were also shouting at Matt and urging him to shut up. He tried his hardest, but in the end they were too much for him. She pushed past him and came running toward us. She must have noticed us going in that direction. I stated I would handle her, even though my dad offered to handle it. My wife, who I'll just call Kate, came racing to me and started crying. I didn't stop her from giving her a hug right away, but I also didn't give her one in return. She pleaded with me simply to talk to her. I accepted, and in order to have some peace, we strolled around the property's trails. The other guy's wife has left him, according to Kate. She told me that he blamed her for everything and threatened to kill himself over the phone. She says she hasn't spoken to him since telling him to simply do it. She then takes out a piece of paper and begins enumerating the ways she intends to make amends with me. She provided all of these services on the first day, including sexual requests and couples therapy. And then she surprised me. I don't want to continue living this way, she says. She stated that she wants us to both quit our jobs, go abroad, and open the small beach bar we've always discussed. She claimed that if I accompanied her, she would depart immediately. In order to contextualize this is all that came to mind for the previous week as I tried to picture my life after the divorce. I assumed that everything would have to be restarted. I might as well add another element to the tremendous change I'm currently going through and just do what I want. I was reminded of how much I missed her and wanted to be with her when I heard her express the same desire. I knew I had to cut the conversation short at that point. Her buddies were waiting for her when I escorted her back to her car. I informed her that although I couldn't guarantee anything more, I would be open to talking on the phone. She felt enough at ease to depart. Since then, we've talked on the phone every night, but it never changes. She sobs and pleads with me for another opportunity. I hung up after becoming upset with her for what she'd done. Right now, I'm having a terrible time missing her. It's difficult to talk to someone who was my best friend for decades. It is heartbreaking to realize that all of our hopes and dreams have been thrown away. The only thing I want is to simply move and start fresh somewhere else. She wrecked it, even though I wanted that to be with her. She took that away from me, that's all. We only have that information from OP. With any luck, he was able to complete the divorce, relocate to a beach, and open his bar. At least we know that the affair partner received his just desserts and that he was able to confront his unfaithful wife. I thus hope that the original poster is content with his life and enjoying himself wherever he is as I wrap up this film, which has already been long enough. In addition, how many of you would like to see a beach bar like the one the original poster mentioned? That is one of my retirement fantasies, and I'm aware of it. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. I discovered my fiancée and my sister in bed together during my engagement party, and my parents asked me to stay silent to protect her reputation. I am a tenured professor at a large northeastern university, 42F. Since I'm still processing what happened at my wedding and, to be honest, I need some perspective, I need to explain what happened. Let me first briefly explain the dynamics of my family. Lisa, 38F, my younger sister, has always been our parents' favorite. Lisa entered the media industry and became a local TV personality, while I spent years conducting research and writing articles for academic purposes. Our parents were always telling me how successful and gregarious Lisa was. The partiality was brutally evident when I was growing up. Our parents paid top bucks for Lisa to enroll in theatrical classes. I was told to use what we had when I required equipment for my science projects. All our lives, this trend persisted. The only person who really encouraged me to pursue my academic goals was my dad's mother, my grandma Martha. "Elena, you have a gift in your mind," she would often tell me. "Don't allow someone to make you less bright." While my parents were occupied watching one of Lisa's TV segments, she joined me in celebrating the publication of my first research paper in a famous magazine. After putting a lot of effort into my job, I became one of the youngest female professors in my field. Even though it wasn't the life my parents had in mind, I created a life of which I was proud. Then, during an academic meeting, I met David, 44M. He was pleasant, intelligent, and seemed to have a unique understanding of me. After 2 years of dating, I was ecstatic when David proposed. How did my folks respond? "Well, at least you won't be alone with your books anymore." Even more telling was Lisa's response. With the same patronizing grin she had had since she was a young girl, she exclaimed, "At last. I was concerned that you wouldn't meet someone who could cope with your intensity." The celebration of my engagement took place at my parents' home. Lisa insisted on assisting with the arrangements, but her idea of assistance mainly consisted of offering suggestions that were more in line with her preferences and criticizing my selections. She began to visit our home regularly, particularly during my work hours. I assumed she was simply acting in her typical domineering manner. In retrospect, there were a lot of warning signs that I decided to overlook. The way Lisa would enter a room and David's gaze would follow her. How she would laugh at his jokes and touch his arm. Lisa started coming to our neighborhood at the same time that David was spending more and more late nights at the lab. I recall the final instance of normalcy before things went awry. I was standing in the bedroom from my early years, examining old pictures hanging on the wall. Several glitzy photos of Lisa were hidden below my graduation photo. It seemed appropriate, a fitting illustration of my role inside the family. However, what followed? Things took an unexpected turn at that point. Downstairs, the engagement celebration was in full force, and I became aware that I hadn't seen David in a while. I told myself he was probably just making a work call, so I went upstairs to look for him. I heard noises coming from my former bedroom at that moment. My hand was motionless on the doorknob while I stood there for a while. I opened the door even though I had a sneaking suspicion of what I would discover. David and Lisa were entangled on the bed where I grew up. I had spent many evenings studying for my PhD qualifications in the same bed. Lisa lacked even the grace to display embarrassment. "Oh, Elena, you should have known," she continued with that same condescending grin. "I always manage to achieve what I desire." The worst thing. Richard, 40M, a prosperous real estate developer, was Lisa's husband. While his wife ruined my engagement, he was gone on business, most likely closing another $1 million deal. I can't really recall what transpired next. In some way, my legs carried me down the hallway as I backed out of the room. David's voice carried that false sincerity I now knew all too well as he called after me, "Elena, hold on. It isn't what you believe." However, it was precisely what I had assumed. Before my parents caught me, I had already gone halfway down the steps. My expression must have told them everything. "Elena, sweetie, please don't make a scene," was my mother's initial statement. "Consider your sister's union. The marriage of my sister. Not the broken engagement I had. My heart isn't broken. The marriage of my sister." With a low, anxious voice, Dad joined in. "You are aware of Richard's fidelity issues. A prenuptial agreement exists. She might lose everything. Elena, please consider the impact this would have on the family." The family. The same family that had prioritized Lisa's needs at all times. The same family that had disregarded my accomplishments, disparaged my decisions, and now demanded that I shield their golden kid from the repercussions of her own behavior. I passed them and entered the crowded gathering. When I walked in, the room fell silent. They must have noticed something in my face. David came up the stairs, buttoning his shirt hurriedly. Her flawless makeup was a little smudged a few moments later. My voice was unusually steady as I continued. "I apologize, but the engagement is off. I have to go, but please enjoy the food and beverages." Whispers and gasps began instantly. Behind me, I could hear my mother's shoes clicking quickly on the floor, but I continued. I went outside to my car after grabbing my keys. David was beckoning me, demanding an opportunity to clarify. Mom was crying for commitment to the family. Lisa watched from the doorway with the same angry smile, strangely mute. I packed up everything that belonged to David, including his priceless collection of rare scientific papers, books, and clothes, and drove directly home. Everything was placed in boxes. After renting a storage container and dropping off his items, I sent him the address and code to get entry. I then blocked all of his social media accounts, his email, and his phone number. My relatives began sending me messages right away, including guilt trips about how this would ruin Lisa's marriage, pleas to stay quiet about what had happened, and cautions about family loyalty. I also blocked their numbers. I came to a realization that evening while I was sitting by myself in my partially vacant flat. This was more than merely David's treachery. This was the result of my family always picking Lisa over me. I had finally had enough of them choosing her happiness above mine. I inhaled deeply, made a glass of wine for myself, and started methodically clearing out their contact details from my phone. Every time I deleted something, I felt lighter. I was choosing myself for the first time in my life. I put myself into my work after that night. My haven was the university. I worked in the lab for several hours as my research team worked on a molecular biology breakthrough project. Despite noticing my alteration, my co-workers were gracious enough to keep their distance. Richard, the husband of Lisa, arrived at my workplace 3 weeks following the engagement celebration. His normally spotless suit was a little rumpled, and he appeared exhausted. Simply put, "I need to know everything," he said. I was honest with him. He grabbed the armrest of his chair and listened in quiet, his knuckles white. After I was done, he got up, fixed his tie and remarked, "I appreciate your candor. You have at least one family member who respects the truth." Then he went away. My parents' efforts to get in touch with me grew more urgent. Voicemails about mending the family were left by Mom. Dad emailed about forgiving others and moving on. It was surprised that Lisa remained completely silent on the radio. My grandma later told me that Richard was divorcing them and had left their home. My pillar of support throughout this period was my grandmother Martha. She would sit with me, share stories about her personal challenges, and bring home-cooked meals. It was her opinion that the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. I was resolved to turn my suffering into something useful. So I concentrated on drafting my next research article. One of the best journals in my profession approved the work. A professor at another university sent me a congrats email the day it was published. Michael, 45M, was his name, and he was an expert in research facility architecture. Michael's email was kind but professional. He remarked that he had read my earlier work and that our departments might work together. I was drawn to his writing style because it demonstrated more than simply professional etiquette. There was a sincere interest in the science. We started a communication regarding the relationship between research efficiency and laboratory design once I replied. Over time, our emails grew longer and more intimate. He talked about how his own family had helped him pursue his unusual career path of integrating scientific study with building. I really ran into him one day when I was buying coffee at the school cafe. I spilt my coffee all over his white shirt while he was at our university for a conference. As I assisted him in cleaning up, Michael grinned and commented, "Well, this is quite different from our email conversations," rather than being upset. He asked if he could get me a coffee substitute. I paused. I had vowed to never date again after David, especially in academic settings. However, Michael was different in some way. Perhaps it was the way his eyelids wrinkled when he grinned or the fact that he made no effort to impress me with his academic background. Observing my hesitancy, he laughed, "I promise I'm not a serial killer. Just a clumsy architect who'd like to replace your coffee and maybe hear more about your latest research in person." "Just coffee," I firmly stated. For the first time in months, I felt at ease as we sat and chatted. David was not like Michael at all. When I told him about my work, he listened. Really listened. With refreshing candor, he told tales of his own endeavors, triumphs and setbacks. He asked if he might see me again before heading out to his next conference session. To my astonishment, I said yes. I sat in my office that night and gazed out over the campus. I felt hope, something I hadn't felt in a long time, when the quad was covered in long shadows from the sinking sun. Not only for a possible romance, but also for the chance to create a life that was really mine, free from Lisa's persistent influence and my family's expectations. My mother texted me, "Lisa is having a hard time." And my phone chimed. "Richard is acting irrationally. She requires her sister." I took a good look at the mail before deleting it without replying. After being torched, certain bridges ought to remain burned. Rather, I opened my email and started composing a letter to Michael regarding a joint study project I was considering. I grinned as I typed, recalling how his eyes had brightened when we talked about the possibilities of multidisciplinary study. Perhaps, just possibly, this was the start of something genuine. Something that was exclusively mine, unaffected by the poisonous relationships of my past. Update 1. 6 months have passed since my previous post. Regarding Michael, the architect I actually ran into at the campus cafe, Many of you requested an update. That coffee date ended up into something I never would have imagined. Following our first meeting, we began discussing our joint study project over video calls. Over time, these business-related conversations turned into lengthy discussions on anything from childhood dreams to beloved books. Michael found my passion for academics fascinating. In contrast to my family, who always considered it as a weakness. There was no plan for our first actual date. We met to go over the specifics of the project while he was in town for another conference. We both were aware that we were hungry as the meeting was running late. We eventually found ourselves in a small Italian eatery close to campus, where we chatted and shared a plate of pasta until the waiters began stacking seats. I was particularly struck by how different he seemed from David. Michael did more than just skim my most recent research publication when I mentioned it. He read it carefully and returned with insightful questions. With refreshing candor, he discussed his own professional struggles, such as a recent project that had over its budget. When he inquired about my family, it was the true test. His genuine desire prompted me to open up, despite my initial reluctance. I filled him in on everything, including Lisa, my parents' partiality, and yes, the disastrous engagement party. He just listened, without the customary uncomfortable answers or attempts to protect familial relationships. He then showed me that he really understood by sharing his own experience with a competitive brother. Although our joint endeavor is progressing nicely, we have taken care to keep our personal and professional relationships apart. We mostly see each other on the weekends because his department is in a different state. In fact, the distance has been beneficial since it has allowed us to naturally build trust. He asked me to meet his family last weekend. Considering my past, I was afraid, but it was not what I had anticipated. I was welcomed right once by his mother, Linda, who shared stories about Michael's early architectural efforts and showed me his awkward childhood photos. It seems that he once attempted to use his father's power tools to rebuild their garage. "We've heard about your research work," Linda said, pulling me aside, which was the most bizarre moment. "Michael is constantly praising your brilliance." It was expressed with sincere pride and interest rather than comparison or jealousy. I neglected to add that I recently received an offer at work that would allow me to work closer to Michael's university. It's a prominent position that would greatly boost my career. His initial reaction when I informed him about it was, "That's incredible. Describe the research opportunities in detail." I was ecstatic with my accomplishment and said nothing about what it meant for us. I still haven't agreed to the job. I'm hesitant to make significant life adjustments for a romance after everything that happened with my family and David. However, knowing that Michael would be there for me no matter what, I feel for the first time that I can base this choice on what's best for my career. Last week, my grandmother Martha met him and approved of him. Simply, "He sees you," she said. "Not who he wants you to be, but who you are." It has been quiet, to be honest, and I haven't heard from Lisa or my parents in months. Healing sometimes entails letting go of those who don't value you, even if they are family. Update 2. My last update regarding Michael was 3 months ago. I want to share this with the group who helped me get through my worst moments since a lot has transpired. I agreed to work at the university close to Michael's. The change was welcomed by my research team, and we have established a method for remote communication. The main reason the transfer has gone smoothly is that I took my time and properly planned everything. Last weekend, the most significant change occurred. I was in Michael's kitchen preparing dinner with him. Instead of the butter I expected, he was holding a little box when he turned back to retrieve something from the refrigerator. He didn't get down on one knee or give a long speech. "You know how we've been talking about combining lab design with research efficiency," he added instead. "Well, I've also been considering merging our lives. What are your thoughts?" The ring was very different from the gaudy one David had given me. It was exquisite and simple. Michael's following statement, "I know your work is important to you," truly touched me. A matching desk lamp is included with the ring for use during late-night research sessions. "Yes," I said, simultaneously crying and laughing. We are invited to an engagement celebration by Michael's parents. Regarding it, Linda has been really kind, often asking if I'm okay with the plans. Michael immediately offered that we forgo the party entirely when I hesitated. However, we're having a small gathering. Just close friends and family, because I don't want my past to control my future. Richard, the ex-husband of my former sister, sent me an unexpected email. He said he's doing well with his new companion and praised me. He appears content now that the divorce is official. Hearing from him was strangely therapeutic. Martha, my grandmother, is overjoyed. She gave me a hug and muttered, "This one's a keeper," after I showed her the ring. She is correct. The small things, like how he turned one of his spare rooms into a makeshift home office for me with a whiteboard for research notes, are what show how much Michael cares. Somehow, most likely through extended family, my parents learned about the engagement. Mom left a voicemail stating that they would like to participate in the celebration and make amends. I have not answered. It's preferable to keep some doors closed. Update 3. My engagement update was 2 months ago, and I wish I could report that everything has gone well since then. I must convey the unexpected turn the wedding preparations have taken. At the lakefront home of Michael's family, we were organizing a small ceremony. Linda has been fantastic. She has always respected our wishes while assisting with arrangements. Only family members, close friends and coworkers who truly support us were on the carefully picked guest list. Then I got an email yesterday that really chilled me. According to what my mother wrote, she and Dad decided to invite Lisa to the wedding. Their logic? She's your only sister, and family should be together on special days. I called Michael right away. Whatever you want to do, I'm with you, he answered before I could even articulate my panic. We have the day, not them. I was able to think clearly thanks to his cool backing. When I told my grandmother Martha, she became enraged. After everything they've done, she said, they have no right. I knew I had to deal with this on my own, but she offered to run interference. Before sending it, I wrote and revised my response multiple times. Mom and Dad, I made it very plain that I didn't want Lisa to attend my wedding. This cannot be discussed. You won't be accepted either if you're unable to respect this barrier. Elena. Their reaction was expected. About family togetherness, Mom called in tears. Dad wrote a long email about forgiving others and letting go. They even had some family members contact them on their behalf. Michael has had tremendous support from his parents during this time. Linda called to reassure me that only those invited would be allowed entry to the location due to security measures. Michael's brother James volunteered to deal with any unwelcome visitors directly. My research team's support was the most unexpected. They offered to surround me with a protective circle during the wedding after I brought up the matter in a lab meeting, looking agitated. My department director, Dr. Anderson, even offered to accompany me on my wedding. Last night, Michael and I went over our wedding arrangements. If it made me feel safer, he proposed that we alter the location, the date, or even go on an elopement. However, I no longer wish to allow my family's behavior to dictate my decisions. Therefore, we're sticking to our original intentions while taking extra safety measures. Individual QR codes will be included in the invitations, security will be in place at the location, and most importantly, our chosen family and real friends will be present to support us. Last weekend, my grandmother assisted me in choosing my wedding gown. She said something that made me cry as I stood in front of the mirror. Dear, you're gleaming. Because you're at last free to be who you are, not because of the outfit. Though I'm more resilient than I was previously, I'm still anxious about what Lisa might try. There is more to our wedding than just Michael and I becoming husband and wife. It's about choosing genuine love over poisonous familial relationships, happiness over drama, and tranquility over upheaval. Update 4. It took place. Lisa appeared to my wedding wearing an outfit that looked to be meant to attract attention and was obviously pregnant, despite all of our safety procedures and security measures. She had somehow entered through a service entrance thanks to our parents. Linda hurried in with a pale face when I was in the wedding room. I'm very sorry, Elena, she was brought by them. Your mother made a fuss about not excluding an expectant woman when we attempted to stop them. She didn't have to complete. My parents had already put Lisa in the front row, but Michael sent his brother James to deal with the problem right away. I felt sick to my stomach when I saw the same smug expression on her face that I had witnessed at my engagement party with David. I inhaled deeply and turned to face the mirror. My wrist was adorned with a handcrafted bracelet fashioned by my research team, the exquisite clothing grandmother Martha had assisted me in selecting, and Michael's first present to me, a lovely necklace including a little microscope pendant. What do you want to do? When I called Michael, he inquired. They can still be taken out, or we can put it off. I support you no matter what you decide. I realized then that I had allowed them to dictate my happiness all my life. Not today. We're getting married, I stated confidently. They can stay, but I'm done letting them write my story. The ceremony got underway. Dr. Anderson, the director of my department, escorted me down the aisle with pride. Everything else vanished when I saw Michael waiting for me with love and compassion in his eyes. We exchanged vows that we had written ourselves. Everyone laughed when Michael pledged to constantly support my scientific endeavors, adding, even if it means converting more rooms into lab space. From peer reviews to late-night science talks, I vowed to be his partner in everything. The reception followed. I believed I was ready for anything, but I was surprised by what transpired next. Lisa pretended to be the maid of honor and got to her feet, holding a glass of champagne. She began by describing how she had saved me from making terrible mistakes, and how she was always looking out for her big sister. Beneath the table, I felt Michael's fingers clasp mine. I noticed my research team stiffening up, poised to step in. Linda was getting up from her chair a little. However, for the first time in my life, I was able to fight my own fights without assistance. Calmly and professionally, as I would have addressed a lecture hall, I stood up, holding my own glass. "I think it's time for the bride to make a toast of her own," I replied. What came next? Well, that merits an update of its own. Let's simply say that speaking your truth with dignity might sometimes be the best form of retaliation rather than being silent. Update 5. Here is what transpired when I made my toast after my previous update regarding Lisa attending my wedding. As I stood there, staring at my sister's arrogant face, I experienced an odd feeling of peace. I'd been lecturing academically for years, so I knew how to control a room. I started by saying, "For those who don't know me well, I'm a scientist. We work with truth and facts. So allow me to share some family-related truths." There was a silence in the room. My sister, who was married at the time, was in bed with my then-fiancé 3 years ago. My parents were more concerned with preserving Lisa's reputation than with my wounded heart when I found them. At last, Lisa's smile wavered. Tom, her husband, whom she had brought as a sign of family unity, suddenly got to his feet. His voice was tight as he asked, "The baby, Tom? Is that why you've been avoiding the paternity test?" There was an overwhelming quiet in the room. Lisa placed a protective hand over her growing tummy. I went on, speaking steadily. "There has always been a trend in my family. Lisa's happiness comes first. They pleaded with me to remain silent after she ruined my first engagement. They helped her get in when she arrived here without permission. But today, I said, is about true family, the type that makes you stronger rather than weaker. My research group, who take pride in my accomplishments. Michael's family, who embraced me with unmatched warmth. My grandmother, who never failed to recognize me for who I am." Tom was the first to go. Lisa called his name and ran after him. My mother was crying as my parents followed. The room's atmosphere abruptly lightened when the door closed behind them. Then my grandmother got up and held up her glass. In her own words, "To Elena and Michael. To truth, to real love, and to the family we choose." The remainder of the reception was excellent. Everyone relaxed without the burden of pretense. My study team secretly practiced a surprise dance, which they performed. I found out the following morning that Tom had requested a paternity test and filed for divorce. For once, I didn't feel obligated to assist in picking up the pieces when Lisa's meticulously constructed world fell apart. Update 6. A year has passed since my wedding and the amazing things that happened there. I wanted to give the community that helped me through everything one last update because so much has changed. Michael and I are expecting our first child, which is the major news initially. My first emotion upon seeing the positive test result was one of terror. It brought back memories of my own familial relationships. However, Michael's answer was ideal. He wrapped his arms around me and said, "This kid's going to have the best mom, a brilliant scientist who knows how to love unconditionally." The family of Michael and Linda has been amazing. Linda was thrilled about my latest research article as well as the baby when we told them. "This child is going to have such an amazing role model," she remarked, describing my work in the journal. I've heard tidbits of information regarding Lisa's situation from my grandmother Martha. Tom's suspicion that the baby wasn't his was validated by the paternity test. She is currently trying to start again while living with our parents. The reality of being a single mother has replaced the opulent lifestyle and fancy clothing. I occasionally have a slight sense of sadness, not precisely guilt, for the way things turned out. Michael's statement, "Consequences aren't cruel, they're just truth in action," comes to mind next. I'm doing well with my research. Michael and I worked together to build a new laboratory, and the university recently granted money for it. His inventive architecture and my research needs make for the ideal combination of our skills. Our work collaboration has only improved our friendship on a personal level. In my new lab, our baby will have a dedicated space, a secure enclosed play area, where they may be close to me as I work. Michael created it himself, adding all the safety features he could think of while still making it engaging for a child's growth. My circumstances haven't changed much, but I have. I no longer feel the need to compete for attention or prove myself. In our household, there is no hierarchy of love or success, only mutual understanding, support, and sincere joy in one another's accomplishments. Grandmother Martha, who is thrilled to be a great-grandmother, comes to visit frequently. She's already crocheting the baby little lab jackets while entertaining us with tales of my own early science projects. Even now, my parents still make an effort to connect, generally through family. I'm not ready, but they want to be involved in their grandchild's life. Some wounds require real change rather than just time to heal. As I reflect on my path, I see that responsibility or blood relationships aren't the key to creating a meaningful family. It's about finding people that love you for who you are, celebrate your happiness, and encourage your aspirations. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who supported me and followed my tale. Although life isn't flawless, it is genuinely and delightfully mine. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. I found out my parents funded my sister's secret family for years while ignoring my son's medical bills, leading to his death. I never thought I'd write this, but my family's tragedy has utterly ruined me. It tells the story of how my sister and dad betrayed me, causing my 2-year-old son to die. There were 4 of us growing up: my mom, 58F, a math teacher at the local high school; my older sister Sarah, 35F; my dad, 60M, a senior insurance agent at a large firm; and myself, 28F. We appeared to have a lovely life and lived in a nice area, but there was always one major issue: my parents' intense preference for Sarah. Favoritism began at a very young age. Sarah had ballet classes, painting lessons, and piano lessons throughout elementary school. My parents told me we couldn't afford 2 kids participating in extracurricular activities when I begged to join any. While I wore her hand-me-downs, Sarah purchased new clothes from the mall. I used her old phones till they broke, but she always acquired the newest iPhone models. Sarah requested braces at the age of 13. Without hesitation, my parents paid $6,000. When my dentist informed me a year later that I also required braces, they indicated we would have to wait due to financial difficulties. I still have crooked teeth at the age of 28, and I never got them. Sarah received a brand new Honda Civic for her 16th birthday. They advised me to work and save money for a car of my own when I became 16. I only bought a used Toyota that broke down after 6 months of working at McDonald's after school for 2 years. All the way through high school, the trend persisted. While I had to work part-time jobs to pay for necessities like clothes and school supplies, Sarah was free to concentrate only on her education and enjoyable hobbies. When it came time for college, I had to start at a community institution, but Sarah attended a pricey elite university. My parents covered all of her costs, including a condo close to her college and a semester abroad in Paris. To pay for my textbooks and bus fare to school, I worked 2 jobs, one as a campus library assistant and another at a coffee shop. After transferring to State University, I was in my 3rd year when I met my spouse, James, 30M. He worked part-time at the college IT department while pursuing an engineering degree. I felt like someone actually cared about me for the first time when we started dating. James was also from a middle-class family, but when he was in high school, his parents died in a car accident. He worked hard to pay for college while living with his aunt during high school. Before we were married, we dated for 3 years. We were saving money for a down payment on a house, so I planned a little courthouse wedding, but James felt that since it was a once-in-a-lifetime event, I should have a genuine wedding. We organized a little ceremony for perhaps 50 people in a nearby church. Sarah said she had an important work meeting, therefore she didn't arrive. Sarah had arranged a family vacation for that weekend, so my parents nearly skipped it as well. When my mom's sister confronted them about it, they abruptly changed their plans. Tommy was born to me 2 years after we were married. With terrible morning sickness and gestational diabetes, the pregnancy was difficult from the beginning. The worst news arrived in 32 weeks. Doctors discovered Tommy's significant cardiac issue during a routine scan. They stated that beginning immediately after delivery, he would require multiple procedures over the course of his life. Despite our grief, James and I were committed to doing everything in our power to ensure our son's health. The day following Tommy's birth, his first surgery was performed. Although the majority of the $150,000 was covered by insurance, we still had to pay $30,000 out of pocket. We took out loans and spent all of our savings. James began putting in extra hours at his engineering job and taking on weekend freelancing work. I was caring for Tommy while working from home as a virtual assistant. Tommy had to have another operation 6 months later. I turned to my parents for assistance because we were already having trouble paying for the initial operation. They had just returned from a Mediterranean cruise with Sarah that lasted 2 weeks. I stated to them that we had previously sold our car and made every feasible cut while displaying all of our medical expenses. They claimed they couldn't help since they were facing financial difficulties. I didn't know the truth, so I trusted them. We barely made it for the following year and a half. James put in 80-hour weeks until he became so worn out that he passed out on the job. I started taking on additional virtual assistant jobs and began using eBay to sell items from our home. During this period, my parents took 3 family holidays with Sarah and gave her a brand new Mercedes for her birthday. They said that because Sarah worked well in finance, she was responsible for paying for all of these. This turned out to be a lie. Tommy deteriorated significantly last month. His heart suddenly stopped working correctly, necessitating emergency surgery that would have cost $50,000. We didn't have a method to get that much money fast, and our insurance had hit its annual cap. I begged my parents for assistance once more, this time down on my knees. I offered to sign a formal agreement promising to give them our house, double the money they owed, and anything else they desired. They declined once more, stating that recent medical expenses had depleted their savings. We were unable to pay for Tommy's surgery, therefore he passed away 2 days later. He had just turned 2. My parents claimed they had to assist Sarah with an urgent matter, so they barely stayed for 30 minutes at his burial. While tidying Tommy's room yesterday, I discovered my dad's old phone beneath the bed. He must have lost it when he was there 3 weeks prior. I checked the phone, which was still functional, and discovered hundreds of texts between Sarah and my parents. I learned the truth in this way, and it ruined what remained of our family. Sarah had been leading an entirely different life, one that none of us were aware of, according to the texts. She had 3 children in Florida with a man named Mark after 7 years of marriage. All this time my parents had been providing for them financially by giving them large sums of money each month. I read through all of the messages for 5 hours. My parents send Sarah $5,000 a month to cover everyday expenditures. Each of her 3 children attended a private school that they paid $2,000 a month for. They provided coverage for their family's trips to Hawaii and Europe. They spent $400,000 last year on a Hamptons vacation home. My parents even covered the cost of their weekly lawn care and house cleaning service. The most recent correspondence concerned Sarah's desire to purchase a beach property. My parents sent Sarah $75,000 for the down payment 5 days before telling me they couldn't save Tommy. Additionally, there were notes about the 3 new iPads and game consoles they had already purchased for Sarah's children as Christmas gifts. The gifts that each child received exceeded the expense of Tommy's surgery. Our monthly family dinner was held today. Every month on the last Sunday, my aunts, uncles, and cousins all gather at my parents' house. In an effort to keep the family close, my mom established this custom 5 years ago. Typically, about 25 individuals show there. Sarah consistently excused herself from these dinners by citing work obligations. I now know that she was in Florida with her clandestine family. I went to supper with my dad's phone. I used screen mirroring to link the phone to the TV after everyone had finished eating and gone to the living room for coffee. I displayed the financial transfers, the communications, and the pictures of Sarah's covert existence to everyone. I told her how my parents refused to help save their dying grandchild, but had paid her $75,000 for a beach house. My mother began to cry and reached out to give me a hug. I stepped back from her. Sitting there, my dad gazed at the floor. With a sneer on her lips, Sarah, who had actually attended this meal for the first time in years, simply sat on the couch. She informed everyone that I was being dramatic as usual and that they should realize that she had 3 children to support and so needed the money more. I questioned her about if Tommy's life was more important than her children. I was crazy for drawing similarities, she said. My mother made an effort to clarify that Sarah was their top priority as she had always required more assistance and had been more emotionally sensitive. My dad went on to say that they assisted Sarah because she lacked my strength and independence. My Aunt Susan questioned them about how they could afford to spend thousands on Sarah's beach mansion and still allow their grandson to die. My parents couldn't respond. Other family members began inquiring about the several occasions my parents and Sarah had taken out loans from them under the pretext of crises. Sarah became irate and said that I had no right to reveal her personal information. She claimed that if anyone learned about this circumstance, her children would suffer from trauma. I informed them that they were no longer my family. In order to purchase a beach property for Sarah, they witnessed the death of my son. I told them that their decisions had killed them, just as Tommy had died. Sarah began to yell that I was jealously attempting to ruin her life. She claimed that because our parents loved her more, I had always envied her. I banned their numbers after leaving their home. I was followed by several family members who promised to help me if I decided to file a lawsuit. Sarah and my parents have been blocked on social media by the majority of my cousins, but some relatives are emailing me to say that I went too far by disclosing Sarah's secret in public. They believe I ought to have dealt with it in private. James agrees with my decision to stop communicating with them, but he believes there was a better way for me to reveal the truth. I don't care anymore, but he is concerned about how this may impact our ties with our extended family. Instead of protecting their grandson's life, my parents decided to fund Sarah's opulent lifestyle, which is why my son is dead. Update. Since I revealed Sarah and my parents during the family dinner, a lot has transpired. Over the years, more relatives have come forward with tales of my parents' deceit and Sarah's manipulation. I'm more and more aware of their deceit with every new story. 3 days after the dinner, I received a call from my Aunt Linda. She sobbed as she informed me about last year's $30,000 loan to Sarah. According to Sarah, her oldest kid developed appendicitis and required emergency surgery. Because she didn't want another child to go through what Tommy had gone through, Linda spent all of her retirement funds to assist. Later, Linda learned that there was no operation. Sarah installed a pool and updated the kitchen at her beach house using the funds. The story of my cousin Emily was even worse. She visited my home last week and told me something that made me feel nauseous. Emily was engaged to Mark, Sarah's husband, 8 years prior. After graduating from college, Emily and Mark became engaged. They sent out invites, organized a lavish wedding, and Emily even purchased her own gown. Mark went missing 2 weeks prior to the wedding. He wrote a note stating that he wasn't prepared to get married. After having a breakdown, Emily required 2 years of therapy. She is aware of the reality now. While Mark was engaged to Emily, Sarah had been seeing him in secret for months. He was persuaded by Sarah to abandon Emily and follow her to Florida. My parents were well informed. They assisted Sarah and Mark in choosing their Florida home. 3 months after Mark's separation from Emily, they even went to their small, secret wedding. They were aware of Sarah's actions and watched Emily battle sadness the entire time. 2 more stories were then released. I was discovered on Facebook by Tom, Sarah's first husband. Sarah's previous marriage to Mark was unknown to me. Soon after graduating from college, Tom and Sarah were married and had a daughter. Sarah emptied their bank accounts and vanished when their daughter was 2 years old. She seized all of Tom's inheritance from his grandmother, along with $40,000 from their savings. Sarah informed everyone that she had to leave because Tom was abusive. Sarah's falsehoods cost Tom his job, his home, and almost their daughter's custody. In order to obtain child support for their now 15-year-old daughter, he had been looking for Sarah for years. Sarah's whereabouts were always known to my parents. They assisted Sarah in creating fictitious documents demonstrating that she was in danger from Tom and paid attorneys to contest Tom's custody claims. Everything became worse when James discovered something in our safe deposit box last week. Like they said they did for all their grandchildren, my parents set up a trust fund for Tommy when he was born. They committed to investing $1,000 each month until he became 18. There should have been more than $100,000 in the trust. We discovered records that demonstrated they had been moving all of the funds to Sarah's children's accounts. James continued searching through our documents and discovered further proof of their dishonesty. My parents were retired and on fixed incomes, so each time we filed for financial aid for Tommy's medical bills, they wrote letters to the hospital stating that they were unable to assist. However, their bank records reveal that they were simultaneously sending Sarah sizable sums. I was contacted over LinkedIn by my dad's secretary. According to her, my dad had been assisting Sarah with corporate funds, classifying the transfers as business costs. In order to demonstrate that Sarah was a business consultant for his insurance company, he fabricated paperwork. According to the secretary, he had sent more than $200,000 in business funds to Sarah throughout the previous 3 years. According to my mom's best friend, who also works at the same school, my mom has been embezzling money from the school's fundraising accounts in order to give it to Sarah. She changed the records to hide it. Each year, the school generated funds for the medical emergencies of its students. This fund was overseen by my mother, who also had access to every account. Since I blocked Sarah, she has been attempting to reach me from several phone numbers. She occasionally threatens to sue me for violation of privacy and defamation. At other times, she calls in tears and says that Mark is questioning her about her history and she wants my assistance. She said in her voicemail yesterday that if I didn't stop anyone from looking into her finances, she would tell everyone that I had abused Tommy. Yesterday, my parents issued a letter via their attorney. They said that if I agreed not to sue them, they would create a new trust fund for my future children. To demonstrate their good faith, they promised to contribute $200,000 right away. They also wanted me to sign a non-disclosure agreement in the letter, which said that I would never speak about Sarah's life or how they helped to sustain her financially. A number of family members have severed all communication with Sarah and my parents. After learning of what transpired, my dad's golfing pals have ceased inviting him to their weekly events. The other members of my mom's book club, who were primarily the parents of her students, no longer wanted to get out with her, so she had to dissolve it. The most challenging aspect is that pictures of Sarah's family traveling to upscale locations while Tommy was ill kept turning up. The same week that we were pleading with my parents to contribute to Tommy's last surgery, someone discovered photos of Sarah's family at Disney World. The matching outfits Sarah's children are wearing in the pictures cost more than what we had to buy to save my son's life. Second update. Our attorney discovered something that clarifies a lot of my parents' actions, particularly their strong preference for Sarah. Sarah is not their biological daughter, as we found out. At the age of 2, she was adopted. They didn't tell anyone, not even Sarah. While our lawyer was looking into the missing trust fund funds, the adoption documents surfaced. Sarah was adopted by my parents following my mother's 4 miscarriages. Because they were concerned that it would impact Sarah's feeling of family, they chose to keep the adoption a secret. Not even our grandparents were informed. In order to avoid being questioned about the unexpected arrival of a 2-year-old, they relocated to a different city immediately following the adoption. The attorney also discovered proof that my parents had assisted Sarah in her scam throughout the years. My parents hired someone $155,000 to fabricate transcripts indicating Sarah graduated with honors after she left college after 2 years. They had a business associate of my dad write fictitious work references for her. Sarah never worked anyplace. All of the jobs she claimed to have had throughout the years were fictitious. In order to obtain credit cards and loans, my parents assisted her in fabricating an identity. They obtained phony papers by using my dad's contacts at the insurance firm. Sarah obtained moreover $300,000 in loans from various banks using this fictitious name. My dad's business provided the funds that my parents used to make the payments. Sarah lost all control when our lawyer informed her about the adoption. She posted all of this on Facebook. She disclosed how my parents assisted her in stealing Emily's fiancé, hiding from her first husband, and concealing her credit card theft. She even acknowledged that she had made false claims regarding the abuse of her first spouse. Sarah shared images of text exchanges that demonstrated how my parents assisted her in fabricating a medical emergency so she could get family members to lend her money. She had a routine. She would choose a financially secure relative, fabricate a narrative about one of her children requiring medical care, and have my parents verify her account. In this way, they conned at least 7 different relatives. At last, my parents sobbed and told our lawyer everything. They have supported Sarah and her family with over $500,000 over the last 10 years. They borrowed funds from their retirement accounts, took out second and third mortgages on their home, and my dad even embezzled from the client accounts of his business. I was even more incensed by their response when the lawyer questioned them about why they chose to let Tommy die rather than assist us. They said that if they stopped providing Sarah money, they would be cut off from their grandkids. According to my dad, if the kids ever stopped supporting Sarah's lifestyle, she had threatened to vanish with them. My mother acknowledged that she was aware of Sarah's scheme to take Mark away from Emily. She claimed that Sarah had confided in her that she would stop at nothing to win Mark's affection. Rather than intervening, my mother assisted Sarah in setting up private sessions with Mark. Even the note that Mark left for Emily was written with her assistance. Our lawyer now works with Tom, Sarah's first husband. He has evidence that my parents assisted Sarah in fabricating accusations of domestic abuse against him. To fabricate medical records indicating injuries, they hired a physician. With the aid of these documents, Sarah was able to get restraining orders against Tom, which barred him from visiting his daughter for several years. When my dad's business learned about the stolen funds, an internal investigation was launched. He had been fabricating insurance policies and keeping the premiums, they found out. He used the funds to support Sarah and created policies for non-existent people. He was dismissed by the corporation and is facing criminal prosecution. Concerned about being linked to my dad's scam, a number of his business associates have severed their connections with him. After parents protested that their children were being taught by someone involved in fraud, my mother was forced to leave teaching early. Additionally, the school is looking into the disappearance of dollars from student activities funds. In order to cover their legal expenses, my parents had to sell their home. They could be charged with fraud, embezzlement, and aiding in the creation of fraudulent documents. For making fictitious police reports about her first husband, identity theft, and financial fraud, Sarah is under investigation. Update 3. Over the last 6 months, everything with my family has dramatically changed. In order to settle their legal debts, my parents had to sell their home and the majority of their belongings. They currently reside on the opposite side of town in a little 1-bedroom apartment. My dad needs to repay $400,000 that he took from customer accounts after his company won their lawsuit against him. Unfortunately, no insurance firm will hire him, so he is now working as a night security guard. After Mark learned about Sarah's first marriage and all of her falsehoods, Her life completely collapsed. Even more information about her past was discovered by the private investigator he hired. Prior to her first marriage, Sarah had another child from a previous relationship. She never mentioned this child to anyone and relinquished her parental rights. The fact that she had left 2 children behind before becoming his wife and father repulsed Mark. Mark obtained full custody of their 3 children after filing for divorce. The judge concurred that Sarah's past of deception and desertion made her an unfit mother. She is not even permitted to visit the kids unattended. Mark and the children returned to their hometown in Texas. He had to obtain a restraining order since Sarah kept creating fresh social media profiles to reach him. Tom, Sarah's first husband, won his appeal for retroactive child support. Sarah was ordered by the court to give him $150,000 plus interest for the years she was missing. They are seizing the meager fortune she received from our grandma last year since she's unemployed. Now 15, Tom's daughter won't talk to Sarah or my parents after finding out that they assisted in keeping her from her father. Because of the stolen fiancé event, my cousin Emily sued Sarah in civil court for mental anguish. Sarah and my parents planned the entire thing months in advance, according to old emails that Emily's lawyer discovered. Because Mark's family was wealthy, they specifically targeted him. Last month, the matter was resolved out of court, but as a condition of the deal, Sarah had to give Emily her beach house. James received an offer of employment in Colorado that had complete medical benefits and higher wages. To start over, we made the decision to relocate. We're keeping it quiet this time, but I'm 4 months pregnant. The only people who are aware of the pregnancy are my Aunt Linda and 2 cousins. We've made the decision to stop communicating with Sarah and my parents. Some family members are still attempting to persuade me to pardon my parents. They claim that my parents have learned their lesson and lost everything. I am constantly getting letters from Uncle Bob about how my parents miss us and cry during family get-togethers. However, I informed him that I don't care about their tears because their decisions caused my son to lose out on his entire life. Last week, Sarah was arrested for attempting to use her children's social security information to apply for new credit cards. She is being charged with identity theft. When she was in jail, she called me to seek assistance with bail money. I banned the phone number of the jail. The only positive outcome of this circumstance is the increased closeness of other family members. In Colorado, my Aunt Linda moved close to us to assist with the impending baby. My cousins have established a group chat where we encourage one another and communicate every day. Without Sarah and my parents, we are starting a new family. Every day I still miss Tommy. We talk about him a lot, and his photos are everywhere in our new home. However, I'm happy that my parents and Sarah's truth was revealed. At least they are no longer able to harm others with their falsehoods. Among all of this, the most difficult lesson I took away was that sometimes the people who ought to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the most. However, right now, my attention is on the future and creating a better life with the family members that genuinely care about us.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.